who I am? I am Boba Fett.
Hello there.
This is where the fun begins.
After The Mandalorian's third season failed to include a Boba Fett, many fans are wondering when he might show up next. It's been just over a year since the Book of Boba Fett, and there's been no real word on when Tamora Morrison might return in the iconic role. And so while the iconic bounty hunter's big solo show wasn't received all too well, at the end of the day, people still want him to return on the screen. Many thought he would show up at some point in The Mandalorian Season 3. I definitely was holding out hope and was very much wanting to see him in the third season of The Mandalorian, but it just unfortunately never actually ever happened. And despite obvious places to do so, and misleading promotional posters at that as well, Boba Fett remained to his quaint little town on Tatooine, remaining off-screen and away from the events of the third season of The Mandalorian. But what does director Robert Rodriguez have to say about that? Robert Rodriguez, of course, is the director of the Book of Boba Fett. Some episodes were better than others, and for the most part, he directed some of those slower episodes. But at the same time, he has a phenomenal track record for Boba Fett, having directed the Mandalorian Season 2 episode where Boba Fett shows up to retrieve his armor from the Mandalorian, whacking stormtroopers with his stick, and just to overall have Boba Fett back in action, back in canon, and everything like that was incredible. And really, Robert Rodriguez did an amazing job with that. So recently, during an interview with Gizmodo, Robert Rodriguez, who directed 7 episodes of the Book of Boba Fett after helming one installment of The Mandalorian Season 2, commented on the chance of Boba Fett's return. After The Mandalorian Season 3, of course. Maybe not so surprisingly, the filmmaker admitted that he can't say and how he's sworn to secrecy, saying that in full quote from Robert Rodriguez, "I can't say. I'm sworn to secrecy. I wish I could tell you. I know all the answers to what you're asking, but I can't say." Ending that quote right there, he's saying, yes, I know all of the answers pretty much for one thing, but he probably more than likely signed an NDA contract, a non-disclosure contract of where he's not able to talk about any of this or answer any of those questions into those regards. And so, of course, yes, NDAs are very popular and used quite a bit in the film and television world to avoid a lot of spoilers, so it could be kind of a surprise appearance is kind of my thought, but then I kind of believe that the best bet to have had that would have been in The Mandalorian Season 3, so now I think the next likely option to have Boba Fett show up in an ongoing current show would have to be the Ahsoka show, coming out later this year in August. Of course, don't get me wrong though, that doesn't shut down the idea of a Book of Boba Fett Season 2 completely. Robert Rodriguez went on to gush about his experience working on a Star Wars project, just overall, proclaiming that it was just a dream come true, of course, saying that in full quotes, everything you saw every day, it didn't feel like you were seeing behind the scenes. It felt so real. The sets were real. Even the volume was so real that you felt like you were in Star Wars, you know? There's these things called Rock Camp that if you want to go play with Aerosmith guitarist Joe Perry or something, you pay money to get on stage for 2 seconds with him. This is what a director would pay money to do, to have Star Wars camp, just to get to direct and edit and be a part of the Star Wars universe just as an experience is one of my favorite experiences because it was just a dream come true. Ending that quote right there. Of course, Robert Rodriguez really does have his heart and soul into the whole Star Wars franchise. He's a Star Wars fan himself. I mean, in this day and age, who isn't a Star Wars fan? So to see that he still loves Star Wars, he has a true passion for it, I think it's very promising to see him actually work on future projects. So maybe to see him take on a potential Book of Boba Fett Season 2 won't be a horrible idea, and is actually something I would love to see. Let me know in the comments down below what you think about that. Would you want to see Robert Rodriguez, the same director Season 1 of the Book of Boba Fett, take on a Season 2 of Boba Fett? Let me know in the comments down below. Okay, before we move on any further though, let's take a step back here and talk about how he's sworn to secrecy and that he just can't say anything necessarily about Boba Fett. As I mentioned, the clear-cut answer to that is that yes, something into the regards of a Boba Fett project is definitely in the works. It has to be a Book of Boba Fett Season 2, and I think one direction that they it could take. I'm not completely sure on how they might pan this all out, but something with the Ahsoka show, I have a feeling that they're going to have maybe some type of cameo or a brief scene, a post-credit scene maybe of some type, of where they're going to set things up for a Book of Boba Fett Season 2. Although, as I have previously mentioned, that is something that I would have wanted to see with The Mandalorian Season 3. The Mandalorian overall feels like the more basis show. It feels like the anchor to everything that the Mando-verse essentially is to a point. And I think for another thing, and I would like to discuss this and go in more detail and talk about it in more depth in a separate feature video here on the channel, but in a way, the Mandalorian is kind of sidelining. In a way, it isn't necessarily that anchor or that base that we all may anticipate or think that it is for the other Mando-verse shows like Ahsoka or for Boba Fett, and that if for anything, we're seeing the Ahsoka show actually shift into that role, especially as the Ahsoka show, just basing it off of its teaser trailer, really seems to be world building quite a bit, in that it's going to be taking on that more prominent role of dealing with a lot more characters than just, well, Din Djarin and Grogu. That's something that the third season of The Mandalorian kind of struggled with in a way, but it still pulled it off really perfectly. Of that, to a point, the third season of The Mandalorian was dealing with quite a few characters that it was trying to kind of struggling to a point to keep up with. That's why, and that's also what we call a quote-unquote soft reboot. That's what we saw in The Mandalorian Season 3 finale, of where we see all those other stories and plots, other characters, essentially kind of wrapped up. Everything that we had going on with the Children of the Watch and Bo-Katan, the Night Owls, everybody that was dealing with Mandalore, they kind of finished out their overall narrative. They're kind of just living life now. It was a happy ending. And so that being said, into the regards of our own characters, Grogu and Din Djarin, we see them go off and live their own life, separate from the rest of those characters. It's just the two, Grogu and Din Djarin now. So that's what we're going to be seeing in the future of The Mandalorian Season 4, something that is expected to go into pre-production later this year in October. Anyway, back to Boba Fett. With how popular Boba Fett is as an overall character, just outside of the Mando-verse, it's not a matter of if he will ever show up again, but when exactly. The Mandalorian Season 4 is set to start production later this year, as I had mentioned, which could offer plenty of other opportunities for Boba Fett to show his face, especially since the end of Season 3 sets up Din for some good old-fashioned episodic storytelling, something that isn't necessarily dealing with a more vast universe of characters, as I had mentioned. Remember, we're just getting back to the basics of just Din Djarin and just Grogu, kind of like we saw in The Mandalorian Season 2. Then, of course, perhaps the character's own series can continue at the same time as well, with a Book of Boba Fett Season 2. While a second season to the Book of Boba Fett isn't a thing yet, it's still possible as an outcome for Lucasfilm. Ming-Na Wen, who portrays Fennec Shand in the Mando-verse, recently commented on how she wanted Disney to be announcing that very soon. So the whole idea of a Book of Boba Fett Season 2 isn't a total blind type of thing here. This is something that we have heard of before. Many fans have been keeping hope alive that Cad Bane is alive as well and will see another day. Another batch of episodes could make the hopeful outcome a reality. This is also something that we recently did discuss here on the channel, so check that video out as well. At the end of the day, it would also be hard to imagine a Mando-verse movie event not including Boba Fett in the proceedings. They have to continue it on and bring him into that movie somehow, some way. The hardest part is that just fans will have to wait however many years it'll be before they put that into theaters and it actually becomes a thing. Anyway, let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below. What do you think about Boba Fett and having him in the future of the Mando-verse here and the overall Star Wars franchise? Would you like to see him in a Book of Boba Fett Season 2? And if so, what would you like to see with that overall season? I would love to hear all of your thoughts and opinions, your initial reaction to all of this in the comment section down below. And until next time, I'll catch you guys in the next video. Thanks so much for watching today's video. May the Force be with you as always. This has been Unofficial Star Wars. Peace out.